All right, today we're jumping into something from the Bible that, honestly, seems to make no sense at first glance. We're going to unpack the idea of leprosy, and according to our source material, it reveals a spiritual truth that is way deeper than you might think.
Okay, so get this. The central mystery we're exploring is a real head-scratcher. You have a person who is partially sick, and they're considered unclean, right? But if that same disease suddenly covers their entire body, boom, they're declared clean.
How does that work?
And look, this isn't someone's wild theory. It's right there, spelled out in black and white in the book of Leviticus. The text itself gives us this bizarre paradox. So what on earth is going on here? To solve this puzzle, our source guides us on a really fascinating journey. It all starts with this strange paradox, but it leads us to a secret hidden inside a single powerful word.
You know, so often with these ancient texts, the real gold is buried in the original language, not just the translation. And that's exactly what's happening here. The answer isn't in what we read, but in what the word originally meant.
So for our second section, let's see how this one Hebrew word pretty much unlocks the entire concept. So the word we're zeroing in on is Basar. Now its main meaning is pretty much what you'd expect, flesh or body. It shows up hundreds of times in the Old Testament, and that's what it means. Simple enough, right?
But, and this is where things get really cool, when you dig down to the root of that word, a totally different meaning just pops up, something you would never expect.
Believe it or not, that exact same root also means to bring good news. This is the word you see in Isaiah talking about bringing good news to the poor. It's literally the word for the gospel.
So you've got this one word, Basar, pulling double duty. On one hand, it's the physical, carnal body. On the other, it's this spiritual message of good news. You got to keep that dual meaning in your head, because it is the key to absolutely everything.
All right, section 3. Now, to really get this, we have to rewind all the way back to the Garden of Eden to see where this whole idea of spiritual corruption even started.
So the source material points to the very beginning when Eve starts to, well, edit God's command. First, she adds a rule God never gave her, do not touch it. Then she kind of waters down the consequence from you will surely die to lest you die. Big difference, right? And she even gets vague about which tree it is. This act of mixing human ideas with God's word, that's presented as the symbolic start of the infection. And that one little word she added, touch, is a huge deal symbolically. The idea here is that this contact with a mixture of truth and lies is what kicks off this spiritual disease, this infection of the mind.
Which brings us right to section 4, looking at leprosy not as a skin disease, but as a spiritual state.
So what exactly is this spiritual leprosy symbolizing? Well, it's what's called the carnal mind, that fleshly thinking we just talked about. It represents a soul that's been infected by false ideas, and it leads to this kind of spiritual numbness, where you just can't feel or recognize the truth anymore.
And check out how perfectly this lines up. In Leviticus, the big sign that made leprosy unclean was seeing raw flesh. The source connects that directly to an active carnal mind. And the physical loss of feeling that comes with real leprosy, that's a perfect picture of being spiritually numb to the truth. The physical disease is like a mirror for the spiritual condition.
Okay, section 5. We've got the code, we've got the symbols. Let's go back and crack that paradox from the beginning.
So, if raw flesh is the carnal mind doing its thing, what happens when there's no raw flesh left, when the whole person is white? Symbolically, it means the corruption isn't hiding anymore. It's all out in the open, totally exposed. That fleshly way of thinking has basically burned itself out.
And there's another place this white imagery pops up. Remember when Jesus says the fields are white to harvest? Whiteness there means it's ready. It's time for a change. So the leper, who's all white, is, in a spiritual sense, ready for their own harvest, ready for transformation.
And that brings us to our final section where we're going to see this whole thing come together in the New Testament. This is where those two meanings of Basar have a head-on collision, in the best way possible. Okay, pay close attention to the word the Gospels use when Jesus meets lepers. He doesn't heal them, not in the typical sense. The Greek word is katharizo, which means to make clean or to purify. It's the exact same idea as the ritual cleansing from the Old Testament. And here it is, the final piece of the puzzle. When Jesus is listing the signs of his work, he says two things back to back. The lepers are cleansed, and the poor have the good news preached to them. He puts the cleansing from the disease of the flesh
right next to hearing the good news. Flesh, good news, Basar. It's all connected. So, what does this all boil down to? It leaves us with this incredible question. Could it be that this ancient paradox is actually a beautiful riddle? Is the Bible telling us that the ultimate cure for the disease of the flesh is the good news that was hidden inside that very same word all along?